My daughter's husband didn't know I had $2.3 million sitting in a brokerage account when he told me I'd spent my whole life on a free ride. He said it standing in the kitchen of a house I bought and paid for, while my daughter stood at the sink with her back to both of us. She didn't turn around. She didn't say a word. I picked up my purse, thanked them for dinner, and walked to my car. I wasn't crying when I got there. I was doing math. I'm glad you're here with me. Please stay. This story doesn't go the way you might expect. Leave me a comment when you're done, and tell me where you're listening from. I want to know how far this has traveled. My name is Irma. I'm 67 years old, and for 35 years I built something from nothing. I started as a licensed pharmacist at 24, one counter, one rented space in a strip mall outside Columbus, Ohio. By the time I sold the business, I had 4 independent pharmacies across 2 states, a staff of 41 people, and a reputation in the industry I was quietly proud of. When I signed the sale documents, I walked away with more money than I'd let myself imagine during all those years of 12-hour days and failed inventory systems and a refrigeration unit that broke down every 3rd winter. I didn't change my life much after that. Small apartment, a reliable used car, the same grocery store I'd been going to for 15 years. It wasn't performance. I genuinely didn't need more than that. What I did need, the only thing I needed, was to know my daughter was all right. Amy is 36 now. She teaches 4th grade and has for 8 years, and she is exactly the kind of teacher you remember for the rest of your life. She married Lance at 30. He was charming in the way some men are charming before you know them well. Expansive, sure of himself, the kind of man who walks into a room and rearranges it without asking. I gave him a fair chance. He made Amy laugh. That counted for something in the beginning. But I noticed things. The way he finished her sentences before she got to the point she was actually making. The way he'd redirect dinner conversation back to his own territory if it wandered too long in someone else's direction. The way he looked at me, not with hostility exactly, but with the mild, continuous dismissiveness of someone who's already decided you're minor. 2 years into their marriage, Amy and Lance started talking seriously about buying a house. The market was bad, their savings were limited, and Lance had taken out a substantial loan on a truck he decided he needed. I watched Amy's stress without commenting on it, and then I called my attorney, a man named Mr. Kavanaugh, who had handled my business for decades and who did not waste words on anything. I set up a property trust. Then I purchased the house at 4412 Clover Ridge Lane. $298,000 cash, deed held in the trust under my name. The structure I designed made it appear, from Amy and Lance's perspective, that they were making standard monthly mortgage payments to a bank. In reality, those payments went to an account I controlled, and from that account, I paid the actual carrying costs. The difference accumulated in a savings account I'd set up and never touched. They had a payment schedule and a welcome packet from a title company. They never asked to see the deed itself. I've had 4 years to question that decision, and I'll be honest with you about what I've concluded. I wasn't trying to trap them. I was trying to help without the help becoming a transaction. I'd seen what happened in other families when large amounts of money changed hands between generations. Suddenly, every holiday dinner had a subtext. Suddenly, the child's life became a collateral concern. I wanted to give Amy a house. I didn't want her to spend the next 20 years feeling like she owed me the shape of it. What I didn't understand was that keeping a secret is also a kind of structure, and structures crack. For 4 years, I went to Sunday dinners. I brought food, I helped clean up, I sat in the living room and listened to Lance talk about his sales targets and his golf handicap and a coworker he found infuriating. I smiled in the appropriate places. I watched Amy grade papers at the kitchen table when she thought no one was watching. Exhaustion pooled under her eyes, and I said nothing because she hadn't asked me to say anything. The first clear warning sign came about 8 months ago. I'd arrived with groceries. Just extras, nothing dramatic, things Amy had mentioned needing earlier in the week. And Lance came downstairs, saw the bags on the counter, and said, "We don't need all this." Not thank you, not even hello. Just the assessment, delivered like a minor correction to a junior employee. Amy started putting things away in the refrigerator. I helped her. The second warning sign I wasn't meant to receive at all. I'd called Amy's cell, and she'd answered by accident. Lance's voice came through clearly from wherever he was in the house. "She doesn't have anything to leave you, Amy. She's renting some apartment somewhere and she's living on Social Security or whatever. I don't know why you structure your entire week around her schedule. She's not your responsibility." There was a pause, and then Amy said something too quiet to make out. Lance continued. "I'm not saying anything bad about her. I'm saying she's a retired woman with nothing going on, and you're treating every Sunday like it's an obligation you can't get out of. That's not healthy for either of you." I hung up before Amy realized what had happened. I drove home and I made dinner, and I sat with what I'd heard for 3 days before I decided I was probably overreacting. Lance was blunt. That wasn't news. Amy loved him. That had to count for something. It did not count for enough. The dinner that broke everything happened on a Thursday. They'd moved our standing Sunday visits to Thursdays because Lance wanted his weekends free for a golf league, and I'd adjusted without complaint. I brought a chicken casserole because Amy had mentioned being exhausted that week, stretched between her classroom and a school board committee she'd volunteered for. Lance was already home when I arrived, in a mood he didn't bother to manage. We ate. Amy cleared plates. Lance refilled his drink and leaned against the kitchen counter the way he did when he was building toward something and wanted to seem casual about it. "Can I be straight with you, Irma?" In my experience, when a person asks if they can be straight with you, they've already decided to be unkind and they want your permission so they can feel righteous about it. I said, "Of course." Amy bends herself out of shape every week to accommodate these visits. She won't tell you that because she doesn't want to hurt your feelings. But it's a real strain. And I think— He paused, performing the word choice. "I think you've gotten comfortable treating this place like an extension of your own space. You come in, you take over, you stay. We're busy people. We don't have unlimited bandwidth." Amy had gone out to the garage to look for something, just us in the kitchen. "And honestly," he kept going, "you've never really had to hustle the way Amy has. You had a steady job, you had a husband who covered a lot of the weight, and your retirement just kind of materialized. Meanwhile, Amy is on her feet 6 hours a day, and she comes home and then she's supposed to entertain." He gestured in my direction, a sort of comprehensive gesture, like he was indicating everything I was and found it insufficient. "Someone who frankly hasn't contributed much. It's a lot to ask." Amy came back through the garage door carrying a toolbox. She looked at my face, then at Lance's, and she asked, "Everything okay?" Lance said, "Yeah, we were just talking." Amy looked at me once more, just a second, direct, searching, and then she turned back to the counter. She knew. I could see that she knew, and she turned away from it anyway. I finished dinner. I thanked them. I hugged Amy at the door, and she held on for 3 seconds longer than she normally did, which I noted and said nothing about. Then I drove 20 minutes home in the dark, parked in my lot, and sat in my car with the engine off. Not crying. Calculating. I opened my records the moment I got inside. The house at 4412 Clover Ridge Lane, current market value approximately $415,000. It had gained well in 4 years. Deed holder: Irma Louise Weston, through the Clover Ridge Property Trust. Monthly payment from Lance and Amy to my operating account: $1,800. Actual carrying costs I paid out, $1,240. Amount accumulating in a savings account I hadn't touched, $610 monthly for 4 years, or just under $30,000. Total I had invested in their lives between down payment, setup, and trust overhead, north of $190,000. And Lance thought I'd coasted. I called Mr. Kavanaugh first thing Monday morning. He pulled the trust documents while I was still on the phone and confirmed what I already knew. The property was mine in every legal sense. No promissory note had ever existed between us, and I could reclaim or restructure the arrangement at any time I chose. "What outcome are you looking for?" he asked. I want my daughter to know the truth, I said. All of it. And I want her husband to understand what he's been standing on. He drafted a formal property disclosure notification, not an eviction, just a document establishing that the trust was under active review and that all parties should be made aware of the existing ownership structure. Legally routine, functionally a lit match. I held it for 1 week. I wanted to know if Amy would call me first. She called on day 3. She said Lance thought we should take a little space from each other, that we'd developed a pattern that wasn't healthy, that he felt concerned about me relying too heavily on their household. She delivered it carefully, the way she'd learned to deliver Lance's opinions in language that softened them. I understand, I said. Mom, I really do, Amy. I understand completely. I called Mr. Kavanaugh after we hung up. Send the document. It arrived in their mailbox on a Friday. By Saturday morning, I had 9 text messages from Lance, 4 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. Kaz's cousin, as it turned out, who was apparently a real estate attorney, and who left a voicemail referencing his client's significant equity interests in the property. They had no equity interests. They had what I had allowed them to believe. I forwarded the voicemail to Mr. Kavanaugh, who responded in under an hour. Noted, no legal standing. We continue. What I had not anticipated was Amy. She came to my apartment Sunday morning, alone. She'd been crying, or close to it, and she stood in my doorway and said very quietly, "Mom, I need to understand what's happening." I made coffee. I told her to sit down. And then I told her everything. Not just the house, everything. The trust structure, the deed, the payment arrangement, how it had actually worked for 4 years. And then, because I'd spent a week deciding that if I was going to clear the air, I was going to clear all of it, I told her about the money, the pharmacies, what I'd built and what I'd sold them for, the number. She went very still. "You let us believe," she said slowly, "that you were just getting by." I never lied. I just didn't volunteer the full picture. For years. She looked at the table. "Lance has been telling me for 2 years that you were becoming dependent, that I was enabling something unhealthy, that your needs were." She stopped. "Then, he made me feel guilty for wanting to see you." "I know." She looked up. "Mom, I've been sending you money. Every month, 2 years, $400 out of my personal account." Lance didn't know. I didn't tell him, because he would have said it was enabling. "I just thought you were tight and I didn't want you to have to ask." I went to my laptop. I pulled up the account I used for small deposits. There they were, 24 transactions, $400 each, labeled Mom, Grocery Fund, regular as a heartbeat. For 2 years, while her husband told her I was a drain on their lives, my daughter had been quietly, privately, without any expectation of acknowledgement, supplementing what she thought was my insufficient income. I went to the sink and stood there for a minute with my back to her. When I turned around, she was watching me. "He called me useless," I said. "He said I'd coasted my whole life while you two worked. He said I hadn't contributed much." "I heard him," she said. "I was in the garage. I came back to the door and I heard, and I walked in with the toolbox and I didn't say anything." She didn't look away. "That's what I'm most sorry for. Not Lance, me." We sat at that table for a long time. The coffee went cold. By the end of it, I didn't have answers to everything, but I had something more useful, an accurate picture of who my daughter was, not the woman who'd been standing at the sink. The one who'd been sending $400 a month in secret because she'd rather do something small and unseen than nothing at all. Lance came to my apartment the following Tuesday. He sat on the edge of my sofa like a man who has decided to be reasonable and wants credit for it, and he proposed that they refinance the house in their names, pay me whatever I felt I was owed, and move forward cleanly. He said it the way people say things they've rehearsed, smoothly, with the logic pre-assembled, the exits pre-identified. "You told me I'd lived my whole life on a free ride," I said. He shifted slightly. I was frustrated and I said some things that, were they true? "Irma, I'm asking you directly. When you said those things, did you believe them?" He didn't answer. Because if they were true, I said, then there's nothing to negotiate. A useless woman with nothing to offer shouldn't have anything you need. And if they weren't true, then you said them in front of my daughter while she stood there and said nothing. And I'd like you to sit with that before you ask me for anything. He left without the agreement he'd come for. Mr. Kavanaugh filed the formal reclamation paperwork the next morning. 30 days to vacate or negotiate a lease at market rate, approximately $2,800 a month for a home of that size and location. I was prepared for whatever came next. What came next was Amy telling Lance to leave the house temporarily. Not because I asked her to. I didn't ask her for anything, because she said she needed to think clearly, and she couldn't do that with him there, telling her how to interpret what she was thinking. He went to a coworker's place. She stayed. A written apology from Lance arrived through Mr. Kavanaugh's office the following week. 3 paragraphs, professionally worded, containing the phrase, "any distress I may have caused," which is the signature of an apology composed for legal record rather than human receipt. I noted it. I was not moved by it. The thing that moved me was a card in Amy's handwriting, mailed separately, plain note card, no attorney's letterhead. It said, "I should have turned around. I'm sorry I didn't. I'm turning around now." The deed to 4412 Clover Ridge Lane was retransferred 4 months ago. It's in Amy's name, not the trust, not a joint arrangement with conditions buried in the fine print. Just hers, clean, documented, no strings attached to the house itself. I gave it to her because she is my daughter, and she had been faithfully sending me grocery money for 2 years out of love for a woman she thought was struggling. That is not someone you extract conditions from. That is someone you show up for. Amy and Lance are separating. She made that decision herself, in her own time, for her own reasons, and I stayed out of it, except to make sure she had a good attorney, and to tell her once, clearly, that whatever she decided I would be there. She thanked me. Then she said she'd already decided. I do have conditions for my own presence in her life, not for the house but for us. Sunday dinners, real ones, where I come as her mother and not as a topic someone else gets to define. Honesty between us in both directions, which means I tell her things that matter, and she tells me when something is wrong before it compounds into 3 years of silence. The understanding that whatever life she builds next, I am in it as myself. Not the pensioner she felt sorry for, not the silent underwriter of the floor she stood on. Just her mother, who turns out to have opinions and resources, and the hard-won sense to know when to use each one. I went to Italy in March. Florence, 10 days, a small hotel near the Arno that I'd kept a magazine photograph of for 6 years without ever acting on it. I ate things I couldn't name, walked until my feet hurt, called Amy from a cafe on the last evening, and described the light on the water until she laughed and told me to stop torturing her. She made me promise to take her next time. I've started teaching a financial literacy seminar at my public library. 1 Thursday a month, free, for women over 50 who are navigating money alone for the first time. Widows, mostly, and divorced women, and a few who've reached retirement age and realize they don't actually understand what they have. I teach them how to read a trust document, how to talk to an attorney without being afraid of the language, what questions to ask, and what answers to push back on. Last month, a woman in the back row asked why I thought women kept their financial situation secret from their families. I thought about Lance standing in a kitchen he didn't own, telling me I hadn't contributed much. I thought about Amy and her $400 a month, those steady, quiet, uncelebrated transfers made out of love for someone she believed had nothing. Because we've been taught that our value comes from what we give, I told her, and we're afraid that if we show what we actually have, people will stop seeing us and start seeing a number. I paused. And sometimes that fear is correct, but the answer isn't to keep hiding. The answer is to find people who are worth showing yourself to. Amy came to the session after that. She sat in the 3rd row and took notes on her phone. Afterward, she drove me home and walked me up to my door, and at the top of the stairs, she hugged me the way she used to when she was 8 years old, both arms all the way around, face pressed against my shoulder, and she didn't let go first. I am not a burden. I was never a burden. What would you have done? If you had built something with your own hands and kept it quiet out of love, and then been told in your own kitchen that you hadn't contributed much, would you have walked out and done the math, or would you have let it go? Leave me a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. And remember, you deserve to be known for who you actually are. Don't let anyone build a smaller version of you and move into it like it's the truth.